everyone, so welcome back. I have finished Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I finished this last night, so I thought I would get up this morning and go through my thoughts and my ranking for this particular book. So this is a book predominantly of two halves. It is the life before Hamnet dies, and it is the life after he dies for the whole family. So this is quite interesting because a lot of people have spoken about this book. It obviously got awards, it has been raved about, and obviously it's set in Tudor England during the time of William Shakespeare, and it is set partly in Stratford-upon-Avon where the family are left, and some bits are told from London when Agnes, who's Anne Hathaway, his wife, goes to visit him in London towards the end of the book, and obviously when William Shakespeare goes back to London to write his plays. Now, William Shakespeare is never named directly in this book. He's often referred to as either Judith or Hamnet's or Susanna's father, or Agnes's husband, or Eliza's brother. But we know it's obviously William Shakespeare. But what I found quite interesting about this book is a lot of people talk about how this is about Agnes being centre stage of this book and bringing her to the forefront of history, because obviously we don't know much about Anne Hathaway, we don't know much about William Shakespeare's children, about his family, his parents and their life. But I got the impression that he's very much not part of the story. In my opinion, he is very much part of the story. He's always present right until the end. There are sections where obviously he goes back to London and he's there in his absence. It's reflective of Agnes building a life at home without him. But really, the last section, which kind of deals with his fame and notoriety in London and how that has an effect on him when he comes home and Agnes is aware he's changed. That's really the only time that we kind of get this difference and this isolation between them, when he goes back to London and she didn't really want him to, and then he comes back a little bit changed. Ultimately, though, this book is quite sympathetic on both characters. While the last bit of the book does kind of deal with the conflict between them both in the marriage, the majority of this book is quite celebratory of their lives together and the children that they have. And then obviously the second half goes into a lot about grief and the way that the two of them deal with it separately. And obviously it dwells a little bit on the naming of the play Hamlet, which kind of ends the book a little bit. But really the first half to me was quite a love story. It was how the two got together. And obviously it's not factually accurate, but Maggie O'Farrell has decided that Agnes has some kind of supernatural ability to read people, and that she was seen in the community as a little bit odd, and William is completely enamoured with her, and it's their love story. Then it's having the children together, and then it's the love that they have for each other, and then it's obviously the plague and the illness. Now, at the end of the book, Maggie writes a note that Shakespeare's never written about the plague in any of his plays, and that there is no official documents of how Hamnet actually died. So a lot of this is that mixing together of some historical facts that we know, and then Maggie O'Farrell's beautiful imagination that really creates vivid characters. So yeah, it wasn't what I expected based on people's reviews. I do think there is a massive amount of Shakespeare in here, considering he's not named. Agnes was such an interesting character, and the children, and Hamnet, and the second half was actually really difficult to get through. It was a lot shorter than the first half, but because it is dwelling on grief, a mother's loss, and describing it in such horrifying and haunting but beautiful ways of how it is to miss somebody, and how the whole world seems to be moving forward and you're just stuck in a time warp for a while. And I think it also is sympathetic to both characters. I don't think this is a Shakespeare bashing book. It does talk about, in the second half, how men and women react differently to grief, and how he ran away to London and took solace in plays and in, unfortunately, in other women. This book alludes to heavily. While she was left behind with the haunting reminder of the house and trying to move forward. And it's sad, because I think the reality is that a lot of people, if they lose a child, it really will impact their marriage and their relationship, and that's just unfortunately true. So I think the way that she addressed that in this book was really interesting, but I also did feel there was still a lot of love between the characters. And the section at the end where she actually goes to see the play was really powerful. It's just a beautiful book. So I've actually found it really hard to rank this, because this, The Death of Vivek Oji and The Vanishing Half, to me, would probably be very similarly tied. What I think is that Hamnet would probably be right next to The Vanishing Half and maybe just above The Death of Vivek Oji. So I reckon this is probably a 5-star read as well. Loved it. It's completely different than the others, so it's hard to judge how much you enjoyed it, because this has got a slower pace. It's got similar sad subject matter to Shuggie Bain. So it's hard really to compare this book to The Vanishing Half or The Death of Vivek Oji, because they're so different in tone, in style, in pace, but just as good. So yeah, The Death of Vivek Oji was about 4.5, and I think this is definitely a 5 with The Vanishing Half. But obviously I don't think it's beaten Shuggie Bain, but it's just so hard to rank it. So I think because this just impressed me so much, and this was so vivid, it was like I was walking down the streets, I could see the house, and I have been to Stratford-upon-Avon and I have visited the houses, so it really made the story come alive. I think I will put Shuggie Bain as number 1 at the moment, Hamnet as number 2, The Vanishing Half is number 3, and The Death of Vivek Oji is number 4. But really, The Death of Vivek Oji, Shuggie Bain, The Vanishing Half and Hamnet are all kind of just slight hair width difference between all of them, because they've been such fantastic reads. This has really been the hardest ranking, because I've thoroughly enjoyed everything that I have read so far. I have just started The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles, and I just read the first chapter last night on my phone before I went to sleep. That's dealing kind of with the AIDS crisis in the 80s in New York. I think that's also going to be really sad and really interesting to read, because I really love reading about LGBT stories and the heartbreak of the AIDS epidemic. Channel 4 in the UK did a really interesting programme about the AIDS crisis quite recently, and it got loads and loads of awards. And obviously I've watched Pose on Netflix that also deals with similar subject matter, so I am drawn to those stories, even though they're very horrific to read about. I really want to read The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackay. I took it out of the library but I haven't got around to reading it, but anyway, the stories that I'm drawn to hearing, and I think they're really important and powerful, so I think I'm really going to enjoy this book, but it's going to be intense. And then the last one is my Dark Vanessa, which is also going to be very depressing, because it's about a grooming story between a teacher and his pupil, who I think is a minor, I can't really remember. Obviously it's a fiction, but a lot of other booktubers have come out with videos since saying that she had to kind of admit it was semi-autobiographical, because she got a lot of stick for writing the story, because people said she was plagiarising other people's work, which I think is a shame, that people, one, think she was plagiarising, and two, like another booktuber mentioned, that they think it's just so unique of an experience, when unfortunately it's quite common. But yeah, I'll park all my thoughts up there because I can discuss that more when I read these books, but I'll catch up with you guys when I have finished The Prettiest Star. So just another check-in. I have now finished The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles. and I am just going to wrap that up for you. So this is set in Ohio in the 80s. It briefly goes through the main character Brian's recollections of his time in New York, but it's mainly set in Ohio. Brian comes back to Ohio at the beginning of the novel. He has been diagnosed with AIDS. He lost his boyfriend Sean to AIDS in New York, and he's come home to die, as it were. And it's about his story, and it's from the perspective of a few different characters. So there is his mother's perspective, his sister Jess. His dad gets one chapter from his perspective at the end after he's died, Travis. And it's basically about how the intimate family cope with the realisation not only that Brian is gay, but that he's dying of AIDS, and when the community finds out, and the perception of the family based on that information. So how Jess struggles through school with this information and her peer groups, and how Brian's mum ends up losing her job due to it, and the tension in the marriage between Travis and Sharon, I think is her name, Brian's mum. And obviously it goes into Brian's death, really. It doesn't actually go into his moment of death, but of the process of him dying of AIDS. And one of the things he's really interested in doing is documenting his life. So he has a camcorder that he takes home with him, and he tries to film messages for his family and video them in kind of normal moments, everyday life, so that you can capture that. And it is a really interesting book on the AIDS epidemic and the intricate life of Brian and his contemplation of his own death at such a young age. I think he was in his 20s. I have read and watched a lot on the AIDS epidemic because it's something that I personally feel is a part of history that we shouldn't lose, that we should keep documenting these things, not just for awareness, but also to celebrate those people's lives who died way too soon because of a really poor and shitty illness. And we should be aware of the ways that we are cruel to each other. In particular, the AIDS crisis was so heartbreaking because government didn't want to get involved, healthcare assistants didn't want to help, nobody wanted to find a cure to this disease, and a lot of people in America of highly religious beliefs were saying it was God's way of cleansing the world of the gays and the homosexuals, and things that I just think are abhorrent and disgusting, and the ignorance. And one of the main events in which the book hinges on is the moment that Brian tries to use the public swimming pool and the repercussions of that. And I found that just so soul destroying. It does briefly touch on race as well a little bit here, because this Ohio community is very backwards, and obviously Brian's boyfriend who died, Sean, was black, and obviously people have a lot of comments about his colour, his race, his skin. And there's a lot of commentary on kind of homosexuality and homophobia in this book. So I found it really great and really powerful. I think the only thing is I was left wanting, and I only think that reason is because of how good the other books are in this selection. I don't think it's a personal criticism of this book, but I was almost waiting for something extra, and I think it's because the other four books gave me something extra. The death of Vivek Oji dealt with Vivek's death and his non-binary, drag, trans identity, but it gave us so much more. He struggled with his sexuality. There was kind of a love story going on, and then there was the heartbreaking death. So we kind of had a lot going on that worked structurally, whereas this was simply Brian coming home and the intimate relationships with his family, which are usually novels that I really love. And I really enjoyed this book, but I didn't fully love it. And I think it's because it felt one tone, one note, and it was quite a long book to get through. I read it on ebook, of dealing with a topic in a very similar way to the topic has been dealt with before. There was nothing quite new enough to excel the reading experience. Now that sounds really horrible because it's such a heartbreaking subject matter, but I couldn't get out the fact that nothing changed. Sometimes the ending in novels, it gets ramped up, or sometimes the novel is amazing for 3/4 and then it kind of bumps itself down with just a mediocre ending. But I didn't even have any of that with this book. It just felt like it was on a steady, even keel. But maybe as a reader, I was anticipating some kind of change. Obviously, I knew structurally and plot-wise that the end would be centred around Brian's death, but it just left me wanting. So I'm quite happy to put it in bottom place at the moment, just because the other 4 books really did impress me. And it's not to say this is a bad book. I think this would probably be a 4-star read. 3.5, 4-star. Was very happy with it, really enjoyed it. It just didn't take me to that next level that definitely the other 4 books did. So where we're going to rank it is, in 5th place is The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles. In 4th place is The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. Number 3 is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. Number 2 is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, and still at number 1 for me is Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart. So I now just have My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, I think. I only have that book left to read, and then I will rank these books finally. And when you see this video, obviously we'll find out who the winner is of the fiction round, but obviously I'll do one last check-in with you guys. I'm expecting that My Dark Vanessa will probably be towards the bottom of the pile, because these other 4 books have been very, very impressive. It would have to do something quite incredible really to bump those off their pedestals. And also, I feel like My Dark Vanessa got a bit more of a mixed reception throughout the videos I've watched on the Booktube playlist, as opposed to other books. Most reviews that I saw of The Prettiest Star were quite strong, and My Dark Vanessa had mixed reception. So it will be interesting to see what I think, because I actually highly anticipated this would be a book that I would enjoy, and I bought the ebook a long time ago before this round of judging started for me, because I automatically thought it would be a book I would be interested in. So I'll be interested to see what I think. So I'll catch up with you guys when I've actually read it. Hello everyone, so this is my final check-in. I know that it's quite dark, it is late on a Monday, but I finished My Dark Vanessa last night, so I thought the best thing to do would be to discuss it with you guys now and wrap these 6 books up for the Booktube prize. So today has not been a great day. I have managed to chip a bit of my tooth at the back. I was eating a baguette at lunchtime, and a tiny piece of a tooth has come out right at the back, so really at the far back end of this side of my face. So I've got an emergency dentist appointment for Wednesday, but now it's almost like it's sticking out a bit here, so it's dragging against my tongue and my mouth feels really weird, and I'm freaking out about it. It's really ruined my day. I was really upset earlier thinking that I might have a tooth pulled out, but everyone's reassured me it probably will just be a filling at the back. But it's really ruined my day, and I feel really crappy about it. So I thought this might cheer me up, and because I finished the book, I can distract myself by talking about a book instead of freaking out about my tooth. So this book, My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, was quite a hard book to read. It was very easy to read. She writes very well, but the subject matter was really intense, and I think this was a perfect look at manipulation, coercion, and the power dynamics in abuse and sexual exploitation. And obviously this is a relationship between a teacher and a minor, and the way he exploited her and how she ended up having to leave the school. and how it affected the whole rest of her life. And then in the wake of the hashtag Me Too movement, Trump being elected president, how there became this reawakening of justice for victims, and how that brought all of her trauma back to the forefront. She never really dealt with it from being 15 when the abuse happened, but the complexity of her relationship to the abuse, because she almost had a bit of a Stockholm syndrome effect with her abuser, and she kind of was besotted with him and enjoyed his attention. She doesn't see herself as a victim because she had what she deemed consensual sex and a consensual relationship with him, but was never really fully aware of the level of coercion that was going on and manipulation that was happening. So I think this book was really powerful from her point of view. I know that she put in the afterword that a lot of people, when she was writing it, told her to write it from the predator, the sexual predator's point of view. But she said that the complex, the real meat of the story, the interesting thing is how the victim doesn't see themselves as a victim, and everyone else is telling her to come forward with this new wave, with the hashtag Me Too movement of telling your story. And what happens if somebody, one, doesn't think they're a victim, but two, doesn't want to come forward about their abuse? They don't really want to have that moment of airing it out on social media or in an article or telling the whole world about it. And I think those two concepts are really interesting, particularly because in the light of the hashtag Me Too movement, people are being pushed to give us their victim status and to tell us everything, and to vilify everyone, and we should all feel outraged and we should all pick a side. And I think it's quite interesting, the complexity that not all victims have the same reaction to their abuse, and not all victims want to come forward, and how there's a lot of pressure and how there's a lot of abuse placed on the victims to come forward. It's their responsibility and ultimately it's their choice. So I think that's a really complex and interesting issue that it dealt with really well in this book. A lot of people have mentioned that Vanessa isn't a likeable character. I disagree in the sense that she's a very complex character, and I think she was chosen on purpose to illustrate this point of a victim not really feeling like a victim. She felt like she had a romance. She read the book Lolita and she thought it was really romantic, and she thought the setup that she had with her professor was of the same ilk. It was romantic instead of abusive. I don't think that makes her unlikable. I think it doesn't really even make her naive. It really illustrates how clever and manipulative these sexual predators are, in that they can fuck with people's heads and make them think that this is a genuine love connection when really it's an exploitation. So I hugely felt empathetic and sympathetic towards her situation. He fucked up a whole construct of romance, love, her trust with anybody. He really destroyed her life and took no culpability for it, and even as she became an adult still created this fucked up relationship where he's the only person she's ever known to give her that kind of level of affection. She couldn't sustain relationships with other people throughout the rest of her life, romantically or intimately, because of him. I don't think that makes her an unlikable character. I just think it's so sad. And she was accused of plagiarising somebody else's work, and since that she has come out and said that this was loosely based on her own experiences. And this story, I don't think you can accuse somebody of plagiarising this story. I think it happens all too often that people have been sexually exploited and abused, and the whole teacher and minor relationship has happened before. It happened here in the UK. A maths teacher fell in love with one of his pupils and he tried to escape the country with her, and she was taken back. So it isn't unique as a concept, unfortunately, but I think this really got into the psyche of how those things happen and the level of just manipulation and just insidious chipping away at the character, to the point where she's in her 30s, still hating herself, still saying, I did all this, I ruined his life, and a counsellor, a therapist is trying to explain to her that you can't hold that much sway, that much power from a 15-year-old girl, that she could do all these things. And she still doesn't quite understand that concept that you cannot, he was in his 30s or 40s and she was 15. She cannot honestly believe that she had that much power and control over him. But he has created this fantasy, this narrative in which he was powerless against her. And over years, he's allowed her to believe that. So it was very uncomfortable to read, but I really felt for her. It was a really intense read for that reason, but it was really powerful and it gave me a lot to think about. But obviously the content is quite distressing and depressing, so a lot of these books have been heavy hitters. So I think I'm going to put it above The Prettiest Star. I think these two books are pretty much neck and neck, equal in my opinion. Both really good books. The whole selection this round has just been so good that it's just been so hard to judge. But I think these two are definitely in the same league. I think I overall enjoyed the reading experience of my Dark Vanessa better because I seemed to get through it quicker. And I kind of got sucked into the story every time I was reading it. Whereas The Prettiest Star, I felt just didn't have that extra oomph for me. These two are on the same level, and then I think the other four were on the same level, just a little bit higher, so it was quite hard to overall judge them. But this is my final ranking, so just reminding you that these are all amazing books. I highly recommend all of them. It was just really hard and I had to make an overall judgment and be a judge and make a decision. So, in 6th place is The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles. In 5th place is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. In 4th place is The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emeze. In 3rd place is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. In 2nd place is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. And my top choice is Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I can't wait to find out who the winner is. So obviously pop a comment down below, because then we can have a little chat about who the winner is, because obviously I won't know. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I can't wait to do the Booktube prize judging all over again next year. It's been a great year again. So thank you so much, Robert, for allowing me to participate again, and bring it on in January.